Okay, now we're on to part 2 of the lecture, Safety in the Workplace. Just want to make sure that you do click on and watch all the links within the lecture and the training module so you can address any and all questions in the final exam related to this lecture. And at the end of this lecture, there is going to be a link to an online certification that you are required to complete via the link that I do provide. This certification program is directly relevant to safety as it entails awareness in the workplace about certain elements, and this is particularly related to human trafficking. As a member of the retail management type of industry, you will need to be aware of human trafficking out there in the world and be able to address it when, if, and where you may potentially find it. So the last page of this lecture and the last page of your PowerPoint lecture notes or the PDF will provide you the link to obtain the certification training, and that is in lieu of the quiz in class, and will take you anywhere from an hour and an hour and a half to complete. So in this lecture, we are concentrating on the portion of the textbook that discusses safety in the workplace and the programs that should be in place in any workplace to ensure that employees are able to work in a safe environment, as well as have awareness of potential safety issues in the workplace. Now, workplace violence is something that may not directly seem related to workplace injuries, but it is a workplace event that does create a hazard. And you'll see in the picture here, there's a gunman who has come into a fast food restaurant or small bakery and held a gun at gunpoint to an employee, and the employee needs to figure out what to do to try to avoid being killed. Violence in the workplace is often psychological in nature, and the most common but least reported types of workplace violence are bullying, intimidation, and threats. I don't know if any of you have encountered a workplace situation where somebody insinuated that they were going to do something to you, or blatantly told you that you better do what I tell you to do, I don't care what the boss says. Or they may have threatened you saying, I'm going to fire you, or I'm going to do this, that, or the other if you don't do what I tell you to do. There's one quote from Joel Dvoskin, who said, I doubt if there's a company with more than 10 employees that hasn't had any type of threat or workplace violence that has occurred. And in this particular situation, he actually runs workplace violence prevention services to Fortune 100 companies. And those are companies that have potentially thousands and thousands of people working in them. So if you can imagine that there's potential for workplace violence in the form of psychological bullying, intimidation, or threats anywhere in the company, it could potentially occur. Now, the statistics are showing that about 700 people a year are murdered on the job. I believe you may have heard of the term going postal. That term comes from several incidences where United States Postal Service workers have gotten so upset and so psychologically bent out of shape that they literally left the work site and came back with guns or a gun, and then went around shooting and killing and threatening and intimidating coworkers on the workplace itself, this usually occurred after a trigger incident where the gun person or the person who was holding the gun were going to be told that their hours were going to be cut back, they were going to be fired, they felt that they were not respected, or they had been bullied or threatened or intimidated, and this was their psychological way of getting back to those who were intending harm, or maybe not even intending harm, inadvertently saying things that provided a psychological trigger to the person who picked up the gun on the work site. There is a URL at the bottom of this video showing a link for a video that's about 25 minutes long and how to avoid workplace violence. So please copy and paste this into your browser and click on it and watch it. Or if you can't click on it through the PDF or the PowerPoint, then just copy and paste it or type it in, and it should take you directly to that video to watch. Okay, are you done with that video? Let's keep on moving. Shootings account for the lion's share of the violence in the workplace. Gun violence has resulted in 78% of the workplace homicides in 2010. Now that's 6 years ago. That may have increased or changed since then. Because these types of cases tend to get the most public attention, they may seem more prevalent than they actually are. What is more common are non-fatal crimes. In 2009, there were over 500,000 reports of non-fatal crimes being committed against adults at work, according to the Bureau of Justice. Dvoskin suspects the actual incidence rate is higher since a lot of people may not have been reporting any of these incidences. It might be as violent as being shoved up against the wall. It could be verbal abuse. It could be tripping. It could be incidences in the workplace where safety precautions have been shut off, such as a lockout or tag out of machine or equipment. And there may be other relatively minor but physically violent acts. It could be as simple as coworkers starting a fight, could be as silly as food being thrown at you in the cafeteria, could be as violent as women being raped in the workplace and they're too scared to report it, or they're in fear of losing their job and or being retaliated against. Overall, roughly 2 million workers annually are affected by some form of workplace violence. Now, for men and women, I do want to point out here that if someone has committed an act of violence against you in the workplace, it is absolutely vital for you to report it to your immediate supervisor. If the violence is committed by your immediate supervisor, then it is even more important to report that to their immediate supervisor. It could later on escalate and get even worse, and it is best to nip the violence in the act and to tell them to stop with the bullying or the intimidation or the physical acts as soon as possible, because it actually will create psychosomatic physical issues with yourself and your own health, as well as put you in potential place for harm. So that's an estimate from the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, and this includes everything from verbal abuse to physical assaults to homicide. Workplace violence isn't always about work, too. Remember that. It's easy to assume that disgruntled workers are usually to blame for workplace violence, but that's not necessarily the case. In about 2/3 of workplace homicides, the assailant doesn't have any personal relationship with the victims, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. For instance, when we were talking about the postal workers going postal, the victims may have known each other, but then again, they may not have known each other at all, or have been even worked on a different shift from the person who came in and performed the workplace violence. There are incidences where a victim of domestic violence may be attacked by an abusive spouse or partner at work, says Christine Walters, a workplace violence expert who advises the Society for SHRM. In this particular case, the domestic partner or the spouse or even somebody who's a stalker may show up at work unbeknownst by the victim and pull out guns or attack them physically or attack other co-workers in addition to the victim of the domestic violence. What's more, even when perpetrators of workplace violence are employees, they may not take action because they're unhappy on the job. So sometimes they may get upset with something that has happened at home and then come to work and then create the violence there. So sometimes they will commit workplace violence because of something else going on in their lives. And there are a lot of unhappy employees, but most are not going to shoot anybody. So the statistical resource for these stats are in this link with the resource URL noted here. When you're putting together your employee guidebook, there should be a section on workplace violence program that is in place in the workplace. So you can refer to it and say this is what should be in here, or advised for action in case something happens. And the HR manager should have training programs in place for several things that may occur in the workplace that will encounter safety issues and violence. So some of the training bullets and programs should be what to do if a coworker or another employee exhibits violence. Should that incident be reported? Should the employee try to talk the violent employee down? Should the employee walk away? Should the employee go someplace that is safe and away from the employee that is exhibiting violence? So a policy in place of this nature would be very helpful in the employee guidebook and give some directions and guidance. Also, what to do if an outside entity displays violence. This could be the spouse of a coworker that comes in that displays violent tendencies, or a unknown assailant that comes in and we don't know where the person came from, what they're involved in, why they're there with a gun or a knife. If you notice somebody coming in the workplace with a gun, what should you do immediately? Duck and hide, or call the police, dial 911? What happens if a robbery or a theft is in the process? If you're working at a fast food restaurant and somebody comes in with a gun and decides to rob the place or the cash registers or commit theft of the people that are in the restaurant themselves, What should an employee be able to do or know what to do immediately? If an employee comes in the process of a burglary, what should they do? Back out quickly, I would hope, and try to avoid being seen, and then immediately dial the police or the 911. Or what other kind of violent incidents should happen? If a employee is in the cafeteria and gets upset at something and starts flinging things around, furniture or chairs or tables, what should the employee do? Also, how to escape dangerous persons in the workplace. There should be potentially a safe place on how to deal with something of this nature. If a HR manager is going to terminate an employee, their back should be to the door so that if the employee becomes dangerous, they can immediately stand up and walk through the door and get out of the office space without being blocked by the violent employee who is being terminated. So there's several different things to be considering and keep in mind with the potential for workplace in the workplace. Ergonomic programs. Now, you don't necessarily think of this as being violent or being a safety issue, but it really is, to the point where people can injure themselves just from sitting and doing their regular job in an office. So ergonomics is the study of people's efficiency in their working environment, and the study of ergonomics relates to the principles of the quality of posture and movement, and in this case related to workplace tasks and responsibilities that use human body movement to complete the task or action. So this picture that you're looking at here in the middle of the screen shows a worker who is sitting at a desk, and you'll note that the placement of the computer monitor is at a specific number of inches away from their face, so they're easy to be able to look at the screen head on. Notice how their elbows are perpendicular to the desk so that they don't have to scrunch down or lower their arms to type. The chair in which they're sitting helps them sit straight up, and their feet are actually elevated just a tiny bit above the floor to relieve pressure on the back of their thighs and legs while they're sitting. And you'll see that they have a perfect shape for sitting at a desk. So believe it or not, sitting at a desk all day can incur ergonomic injuries such as painful carpal tunnel syndrome, and that's if you type all day long, you may have some issues with the joints and tendons in your wrists all the way up to your elbows and even as far up as your shoulders and your neck. It could injure your circulatory system by having your ankles swelled from not moving your legs or crossing your legs during long periods of work sitting at a desk. Or you could incur back injuries and issues if you hunch over a keyboard for hours at a time. So these are ergonomic injuries that could happen just from doing work at a desk. Some companies have started installing stand-up desks so workers who can choose may work sitting down, or they can push their desk up so they can stand for periods at a time to increase their ergonomic movements throughout the day, and this helps them to avoid bodily fatigue or injuries that are ergonomically based due to long periods of sitting. And you'll see in the picture on the left middle that there's somebody who's sitting at a desk and they have a good ergonomic posture. But on the right-hand side in the middle, they're standing at a desk and the computer has been pushed up a little bit, and their typing keyboard is at a perfect height for them to be able to type without dropping or increasing the angle of their arm while they're typing. And on the bottom is a picture of a gentleman who's working in a regular job with a desk that the equipment lifts up from the surface of the desk so he can stand to work whenever he feels fatigued at sitting. Okay, whistleblowing is another issue in the textbook that talks about where the U.S. Department of Labor has provided a resource for whistleblowers to report their employers for issues of safety that are going on that need to be remediated. And the link here on the slide shows the direct link to whistleblowers and how to do it. Now, OSHA's whistleblower statutes protect a whistleblower from any retaliation. Now, some employees are fearful for their job, are fearful that their coworkers or their supervisors may retaliate against them and take some kind of adverse or negative action against them because they do report injuries or safety concerns or other activity that may be protected. Since the passage of OSHA in 1970, Congress has expanded OSHA's whistleblower authority to protect workers from retaliation under 22 federal laws. So if there was a worker complaint that is reported to OSHA and it was reported within a set time frame following the retaliatory action, then OSHA can come back and punish the workers or the company that is conducting the retaliatory action. Any employee or worker can file a complaint if the employer has retaliated against them for exercising your rights as an employee. In states with approved state OSHA plans, employees may file a complaint under both the state and the federal OSHA. Under other federal laws, a complaint must be filed directly with the federal OSHA agency. And you can actually file a complaint by calling 1-800-321-OSHA or the number 6742. In some cases, retaliation by an employer means that the government may levy huge fines and penalties against the company, which in turn will be partially awarded to the whistleblower for their pain and suffering as a result of the retaliation. So that means if you're in a coal mine and you're working and you're noticing that the air handler is not working well enough to provide good oxygen to the workers down inside the mine, or there's some powder buildup from the coal dust, and you report that to OSHA, then OSHA will likely come out immediately, more sooner than later, to investigate to find out what's going on. And if the coal mine owners and the operators are not conducting safe practice within the work site, then the employee that has made the complaint may end up getting a reward from OSHA, and the company that is not conducting safe workplace practices may be punished with fines and levies and other monetary damages for not practicing good workplace safety. Okay, in another instance, via the IRS, while this is not OSHA or safety related, this is parallel. The IRS has a whistleblower program which provides the following. They do provide awards for whistleblowing of illegal activities, and the law provides for two types of awards. If taxes, penalties, interest, or other amounts in dispute exceed $2 million and a few other qualifications are met, the IRS will pay 15 to 30% of the amount collected. If the case deals with an individual, his or her annual gross income must be more than $200,000. So OSHA-related whistleblower awards are similar in the range of payouts. So if you see something dangerous going on in your workplace and you have begged your supervisor, you've notified your manager or their manager about the danger, it is best to report it directly to OSHA about what the issue and the harm that could happen from the safety issue are concerned. All right, as part of this lecture, you are to visit the following link, which will be noted on the next page, and complete the Human Trafficking Certification. And this is going to really open your eyes to potential for what is happening in the real world. If you are working for a company that has international ties to other companies or businesses, you need to be aware of human trafficking and be able to identify it when it occurs. Being in retail management means that you may encounter incidences in the following forms. You may see models that are used in displaying garments who may be slaves to the company displaying the clothing. The makers or manufacturers of the products may be using slaves in steam shops which are making the product, or sweatshops that are making the product using adult or child labor to create the items. Slaves may be used to bring products into the USA to get past border and customs, including fake and knockoff products being sold to unsuspecting buyers. One incident of slaves being used to bring products into the U.S. are also out on fishing ships. So there are a lot of people that are in Thailand and Korea and Indonesia and Bangladesh and India who have been captured or signed on to what they thought was a real company to work for them, and they're being held in cages or slave quarters on ships or on shore to be used on ships when they need to process and fish for the industry. In some industries, clothing making in China, they may have child labor putting together the garments. And I believe that there was some incidences with some famous label fashion designers where they caught some of the clothing being made in sweatshops in the eastern countries of China and India. So this will sort of open your eyes a little bit more to human trafficking and sex and slave traffic. Okay, the URL for the video training is located at this following URL. You can copy it into your browser or click on it and it'll take you straight to it. At the end of the training, you will be able to print out a completed certificate with your name on it, which can be added to your resume as a training certification bullet. So this is not just busy work. This is something you can actually add on to your own resume as training completed. Now, the completion of this training module could take approximately an hour. It could take a little bit longer than that. So please set aside the time period to ensure you can complete it within that time period. And it will be date stamped for you so that you will be able to show and bring in a copy of it.